Hello everyone, my name is Isabel Sáenz from the University of Lleida, and I would like to share my presentation on Tabunka Kyousei, Ideologies of Multiculturalism and Integration in Japanese Education. By myself, I'm Professor Tomoko Tokunaga from the University of Tsukuba. There's a common idea of Japan as a homogeneous, monoethnic, monolingual country. However, this is not quite the case, as there are several cultural and linguistic minorities, such as the Ainu and the Okinawans, which are native to the country, but also the so-called all-comers that came from former Japanese colonies during World War II and after, for example, the Zainichi Koreans, and have been established in the territory for a long time as well. Currently, there are around 3 million foreign residents in Japan. Most of them, as you can see in the graph, are from Asia, and the second largest group is from South America. Of these 3 million, around 300,000 are 18 or younger. This idea of Japan as monolingual and homogeneous has shaped their restrictive immigration policies. As we have said, there is permanent residency for former colonies from World War II, and also the official narrative is that only skilled workers are accepted in the country. However, unskilled workers have been coming for a few years now through other means such as trainee programs and student visas. This is why Japan is often criticized for welcoming skilled workers through a front door while unskilled workers are coming through the back door or the side door. One of the most important policy changes in immigration in Japan was the 1990s immigration law amendment, which allowed residency for Nikkei. These are the descendants of Japanese migrants who migrated to Latin American countries, mainly Brazil and Peru. So they were Latin Americans of Japanese ancestry that are allowed residency and work in the country. There was also an important policy change last year to accept immigrants from 14 sectors that were previously considered semi-skilled or unskilled, such as agriculture, construction, and elder care. And after 5 years, they can apply for permanent residency and family reunification, although this is said to be quite difficult. In this graph, we can see the top countries in immigration in Japan. We can see that the Chinese population is the biggest group, followed by South Korea, Vietnam, Philippines, and Brazil. When we talk about immigration in Japan, we often use the term Tabunka Kyousei, which can be directly translated as multicultural coexistence. This term was originally coined by the Zainichi Koreans in the 70s to combat the discrimination that they were facing. However, as the amount of immigrants continued to increase, there were more and more demands for the government to implement support policies, and thus in the early 2000s, the government started using this term, Tabunka Kyousei, in their immigration policies, meaning a mutual understanding between foreigners and Japanese people. There are some problems with this term, mainly that it focuses on cultural differences and it doesn't address the socioeconomic inequality that is present within immigrants. It also creates a binary between foreigners and Japanese people, implying as well that the Japanese group is a monolithic group and a homogeneous group. Also, Tabunka Kyousei policies often encompass cultural assimilation, as they promote immigrants to learn Japanese culture and language, and not so much this mutual understanding or this mutual meaning. In education, there are similar implications. In the Japanese system, the first 9 years of schooling are obligatory. However, this is only the case for Japanese nationals and not for foreign children. 98% of students in Japan continue to senior high schools. However, if we look at immigrant students, the ratios are much lower, ranging from 50% to 80%, depending on nationality. There's also high non-attendance and dropout rates, particularly in high school, mainly due to the economic and legal difficulties of these children. In 2019, there were around 100,000 foreign children only enrolled in Japanese schools, of whom 66,000 were in elementary school, 26,000 were in junior high school, and then only around 15,000 were in senior high school, showing how the number of immigrant students goes way down when the education level goes up. We can see how this has evolved in the last years. This graph shows the increase of the number of students in need of Japanese instruction from 2006 to 2016, and we can see how this has gone quite up. I would like to talk now about why assimilation policies are a problem and what's the importance of cultural maintenance. For this, I would like to refer to Berry's acculturation theory, which ranks people in four groups depending on their degree of cultural maintenance from the heritage culture and their degree of cultural adoption from the host culture or the majority culture. So those with a high degree of heritage culture maintenance and also a high degree of host culture adoption would have a profile of integration. Those who have a high adoption of the majority culture but low maintenance of the heritage culture would have a profile of assimilation. The opposite of that, low adoption of the majority culture and high maintenance of the heritage culture would be a profile of separation. And finally, a profile of marginalization would be a high level of both. This is particularly important because research has shown that an integration profile, that is, the one who balances both cultures, has a lot of benefits, including higher self-esteem and higher well-being. The same can be found in the domain of language. The linguistic interdependence hypothesis shows how some features from the first language can be transferred to other languages that we learn later. So this is often shown in this diagram, the double iceberg diagram. So on the surface, we see the surface features of the first language and the surface features of the second language. But what we don't see is what Cummins calls the common underlying proficiency, that is, all those linguistic elements that are transferred from one language to the other. According to this hypothesis, then, when we limit the development of the first language, this actually hinders the acquisition of the second language. This is contrary to what many people think, that heritage language maintenance is a problem for integration or is a problem to learn other languages, which is quite the opposite. It actually helps. And by enforcing assimilative policies, we are actually causing problems for immigrant children, not just to maintain their own language, but also to learn the new language. So what are the possibilities for heritage language education within Japan? Currently, not many. There's the possibility of international and ethnic schools. In these schools, students have transnational learning. They can learn the heritage language and the culture and the history of their country of origin, and they're surrounded by peers with the same origin. This is good for identity building and learning about one's culture and also creating a safe environment, different from the isolation or even bullying that they may face in regular schooling. However, the problem with these schools is that most of them don't have any government support, and therefore the tuition is expensive, so not everyone can go. There's also non-formal forms of education, mainly run by NPOs and NGOs, and they provide support in various areas, mainly the preparation for high school entrance exams, but also some of them provide heritage language instruction as well. However, the problem with these entities is they are volunteer run, and therefore they're quite unstable in the resources and what they can do in general. Within regular education, there's really not many opportunities for heritage language and cultural maintenance. There are some schools that have multicultural awareness activities, but they are often limited to superficial or folkloric elements. So finally, I would like to talk about some challenges and future perspectives. There have been some recent advances, including some policy suggestions from the ministry regarding the importance of maintaining heritage languages for identity building and also for educational achievement. However, for the time being, these are just suggestions, and it is yet to be seen how and whether they will be implementing into actual policy. Overall, to conclude, there's a pressing need for bigger recognition of the multicultural and multilingual reality of Japan within formal education, and this should be done within the school curriculum, not just extracurricular activities. Also, there's a big need for government support for heritage language and culture education, as well as the socio-economic and legal difficulties that immigrant students have to prevent academic failure and the overdependence in volunteer organizations and extracurricular activities. Thank you for listening. Here are the references that I have used for this presentation.